right. Hello and welcome to Glimpse into the Writing and Publishing in the Philippines. My name is Julian Fuchs. I'm the director of the Goethe-Institut Philippines, and I will be your host today. I'm joining you from Makati, Metro Manila in the Philippines. So we have a beautiful afternoon outside. I'm sure many of you are also joining from Europe and from Germany. So good morning to all of you who are joining us from there. And welcome to all of you again. This event, a glimpse into the writing and publishing in the Philippines, is a joint event by Frankfurt Book Fair, by the National Book Development Board, and by LitFrom, an association dedicated at dialogue through literature, which is also closely working together with Frankfurt Book Fair. And this event, of course, is happening as part of the Guest of Honor participation of the Philippines in 2025. I hope you're all already excited for this Guest of Honor participation. I'm surely am. And I'm also happy to see that there's a lot of events already happening before the actual Guest of Honor program. So you should also watch out for more, but hopefully you're already enjoying this session today. With me today, I have an esteemed panel of 7 authors and publishers from the Philippines. And it's our objective to give you an idea of contemporary literature in the Philippines, on how writing and publishing works in the Philippines. And I'm very happy to welcome you with me, Cindy Wong from 8 Letters Bookstore and Publishing. Maybe you just wave, Cindy, so everybody sees you already. We have author Sarge Lacuesta, also waving now. We have author Renato Tranquilino. We have Mara Coson from Exploring Galaxies, a publishing house. We have author Carla De Guzman. We have Ned Parfan from the University of Santo Tomas publishing house, and author Cecilia Brainard. Thank you so much for joining, and it's really nice to have you all together here. Yeah, we have roughly 90 minutes today to talk about writing and editing from the Philippines. We will first have a quick input from our friends at National Book Development Board. Tina Pangan will present their dedicated translation program. So that might be of interest to some of the participants. And following that, I will do a round of interviews with each of the panelists. Each interview roughly lasting 10 minutes. So I'll do my best to be fast and also concise and get a lot of information out of our esteemed panelists. And after this round, we'll also have an open Q&A. But of course, this being a webinar, you're also open to, or you're free to ask your questions, post them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them or pick them up in our interviews. The webinar is also recorded and will be later accessible, I think, on litfrom.de. Maybe we can post the link, and I guess also at the website from the National Book Development Board. So if you cannot stay with us for the whole time, or if you have some errands to run in the middle, you can always watch it later on. And you feel free also to spread the word and tell your colleagues, friends who might be interested in this event about the recording. And maybe another thing to mention before we start, there's also a publication forthcoming, a brochure called Contemporary Literature from the Philippines, soon to be released. And I think there's also contributions from some of the panelists. And I think there will also be more information on litfrom.de for all of you who are interested in that. Fantastic. Let's start. Tina, would you like to start with your input on the translation programs by National Book Development Board?
Thank you, Julian. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So to encourage publication of Filipino works into different foreign languages, the Philippines Guest of Honor 2025 Committee for the Frankfurt Book Fair has established the Philippine Translation Subsidy Program. So through this program, the foreign publishers who have bought translation rights of a book from Philippine publishers can apply. And they must ensure that the works to be translated is published in the Philippines and written in any Philippine language. Likewise, it must not have any existing translation on the language the foreign publisher is applying for. So we have 8 major genres for translation, and the available subsidy ranges from 1,200 US dollars up to 4,500 US dollars. So we are now in the third cycle for 2024, and this will end on November 30, 2024. We still have time, even after the Frankfurt Book Fair. So if you're interested to apply, you can just contact any of the publishers or authors presenting later. And for 2025, we have 2 cycles. The first cycle will start on April 1 to May 31, 2025, and the second cycle will start on August 1 to November 30, 2025. You can also scan the QR code here for the full details of the guidelines, and we can input in the chat box the website so that you can read the guidelines later. So that's all, Julian. Thank you.
Fantastic, Tina. Thank you so much. I'm not sure, there was maybe a question from the audience by Anika. Was that still relevant? If not, we start right away with our interviews of the panelists. We'll start with you, Cindy. Cindy, where are you joining us from?
Yes, so I'm joining from Hong Kong, but I would like to introduce our small independent publishing house based in the Philippines, 8 Letters Bookstore and Publishing. So we started about 8 years ago, and at that time, we started as a curator of books. Nowadays, 8 years later, we now have over 400 titles. But that's also because we also serve as a platform. We have a community of over 4,000 writers on Facebook. We're very active as a community, not just in Facebook, but also in Discord. So we have this, we make use of technology quite a lot. So that's the publishing house. That's 8 Letters. You may check us out, our website. So when I was asked to choose between all of those titles that we have, it was such a dilemma. But I think one of the things that's so different about 8 Letters is I myself is also an author. So like, why not I showcase the books that I keep on bringing on Frankfurt. So this is the 3rd time that I'm going to join the Frankfurt Book Fair, by the way. So one of the books that I would like to show you guys is called The Meatball Club. So that's The Meatball Club. It's a cozy mystery, new adult themed book. I also want to show the second book, which is a sequel. These 2 books are part of a 10-book series that's going to be released, hopefully soon in the future. The thing about the Meatball Club, so we target new adults, those readers who are freshly graduates. That's also because the characters in this book, they're based in real life imaginary friends of mine. So who here can relate? Just feel free to comment. But anyway, the detectives in these cases, they're called Detective Sheena, Carrie, and Justin. So they're freshly graduates, and they just decided to start this detective agency in this imaginative city set in the Philippines called Spring City. So there's a little bit of world building on that, because I have to locate, okay, where do I put this? As you guys know, the Philippines has over 7,000 islands. So where should I put it? There's Manila, there's the 3 major cities in the Philippines, right? So I have to I have a background in travel, so I would say I'm quite good in geography. Don't test me now. But yeah, so there's a little bit of that. And also another thing that I would like to highlight in this book, or in this series, the characters, they use innovative strategies when it comes to solving crimes. As you may know, if you have a background in the Philippine justice system, it takes time for justice to be served. But this being a cozy mystery series, it's going to give you still like a happy ever after kind of feel in every story. So each book they has 3 cases that they have to solve, and also other elements that I incorporate in these books are friendship, discovering oneself, and romantic relationships. Yeah.
Sounds amazing, Cindy. Can you reveal one of the cases that is happening in the books?
Okay, so okay, it's hard to choose. Okay, so there are 3 cases. The 3 cases here are narcotic affairs, black ship ministry, and death in Mabuhay Street. So maybe I can talk about black ship ministry because it's a little bit. I wrote this about 6 years ago, but I think one of the major one of the popular pastors right now in the Philippines are like, I think just got caught. It's something similar, right? So 5 years ago, it's a cold case that they're trying to solve. 5 years ago, Georgina Perez was found dead in a mall's parking lot. Who could have killed a woman who was loved by so many? So she's a religious woman who go to church every Saturday afternoon. So, that's one of the cases here, black ship ministry.
Sounds very exciting. I just know that the German audience is oftentimes very excited in a lot of the Scandinavian crime and mystery stories. So I can see a lot of potential there. So far, who is your readership, or do you have an idea who's buying the books or who's interested in the books?
Okay, so the people who are interested in my books, they're usually like in their their teenage years. Teenagers are interested in this book. Up to like up a certain age, like 30 years old, I would say.
Amazing. And do you think that an audience or readership needs some prior knowledge to the Philippines to get really the stories, or is it something that you take them their hand to also understand the context better?
Not necessarily. I would say the focus is more on the characters themselves. So, and then there's also like sort of a world building. So you don't really need to know where is where. Plus, in the book, there's a map as well. There's a map of this small city, small town. So, you can probably solve the case by yourself if you want to.
Oh, amazing. I hope I can get to read it all as well. And it's all available in English so far?
It's in English, actually. It's in English. Everything's written in English. Yeah. But I also try to put in some Filipino words, but everything nowadays are Googleable, so you can try to translate them. These are like the Filipino slangs that I incorporate.
And the Filipino slangs are then in the English version you use the original Filipino words in the English version.
Yes, but not so much, because I also want the international audience to understand it, even without prior knowledge, Filipino language knowledge, right? So what I tried to do was, Filipinos when they talk, they actually, well, I would say 50% is in English. So you probably have heard of the Taglish kind of English. Sometimes when we say hello, how are you, we don't have any Filipino equivalent for that. So we just say hi, hello as well, like for example, right? So and they're very minimal, I would say.
Yeah, the language is something very, very interesting, but of course it's very difficult to study Tagalog and speak it because everybody mixes the languages. So you're always somewhat depressed using it. Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing. Yeah, anything else you want to say about another book that you have in the publishing house, or this is really it? Maybe put it in the camera again so that people see it and also note it down.
Sure. So this is the Meatball Club. There you go. And the second sequel, the sequel to it is Behind Closed Doors. There you go. It also has 3 cases. But with regards to 8 Letters Bookstore and Publishing, maybe I can tell a little bit something about that as well. As I said, we have over 400 titles. We have children's books. We have other literary fiction and nonfiction as well. And perhaps another interesting thing that I would like to point out, because we're also talking about the Philippine literary landscape, right? I mentioned that I'm based in Hong Kong. So as you may already know, Filipinos there, the Filipino diaspora, they're all over the world, right? So a lot of our books, they're written by Filipino authors, but they're also based in different parts of the world. So and because we're exposed to that, we're exposed to different places, that also means a lot of these influences, perspectives, they come into play when we write stories.
Exactly. And you will also be in Frankfurt, I believe, this year. So anybody who wants to meet you can get more information on 8 Letter Publishing. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cindy. Let's go on to Sarge, our next panelist. Sarge, you're an author. Where are you starting? Where are you joining us from? Are you in Manila as well?
Actually, I'm very near the Goethe-Institut. I mean, I'm in the same neighborhood, so.
Fantastic. Yeah, for all the participants, Metro Manila consists of, I think, 16 cities. So it's a massive agglomeration of space and cities and people. And sometimes, yeah, if you're just in the same city, it can be very far. But in this case, Sarge is our neighbor, which makes it easier. Fantastic. Yeah, tell us a bit more about yourself, Sarge. You're an author.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sarge Lacuesta. I'm an author, I'm a writer, and I'm also a small publisher, but I think I'm here as a writer. So would you like me to show off a book?
Please, if you also have a book that you would like to present, maybe you can even put it in the camera.
I have my latest book is Joy. It's a novel. It's called Joy. It was published I think last year, 2 years ago, by Penguin Random House, Southeast Asia. But I really want to talk about my first book, which is Life Before X, which is it's a book of short stories called Life Before X. And next year, actually, the year we become guest of honor is its 25th anniversary. So
oh wow.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe I've been failing for 25 years. So and I've been trying. Sorry, let me just paint a better picture. I can't believe I've been trying for 25 years, but it's a very special book to me because it's a book of short stories, and I really love the short story as a form and recognize it as a very Filipino form. So to me, it's a very a form that's very Filipino through and through. You know, something short.
What makes it Filipino?
Because it's very hot here, no? It's very hot, and people are impatient. You know, you just want to read something and go. Also, that's we have very, very short attention spans. Obviously, we're the #1 social media consumers in the world. I just want to say that. And also, speaking more, maybe more substantially, it's part of our, it's part of our economic conditions, no? To take things in pieces, in small pieces, to appreciate them in small things, to see small stories, no, and recognize, large meanings in them, no. It's quite interesting also that other Asian nations are also heavily invested in the short form rather than the lengthy form, no. So that's something for academics to discuss. There are other academics in the room, obviously, that are better than me and are more able to discuss that. I just write the short story, but I do believe that the short story, our story, therefore the short story, is a story always of diaspora and identity. That's what we've been known for, and we've been struggling with all these decades. No, there's a Filipino everywhere. Therefore, there's a Filipino story everywhere. No, we've become a generic word for other things. No, our story is also a story of sex. No, there are 110 million Filipinos right now, and I think right now at this moment, there are 20 Filipinos being conceived and 30 being born. At this moment, I'm speaking, so it just increases toward the night. But what I'm saying is that sex plays a very large role in my stories, also because it plays a huge role in our very hypocritical culture. you know this. You've been around long enough. No, our story is also a story of defeat. I want to say this. No, we have never fought successfully against any invaders. No, we've probably won a battle or five. No, but ours is a very post-colonial story. It's a very unique story in all of the world, and in that sense, no. Therefore, the story is our triumph. No, the story of sex, the story of defeat, the story of our heat, the story of our culture. It is one of our few remaining real triumphs in this world, and including the language. No, the way we have, and I believe this. No, the way we have recolonized or colonized English in turn. No, the way we speak English. You know this because you're here in town and you hear people speak. Cindy, I think, mentioned that earlier. You know, to speak this kind of Taglish. No, that is for me the story of triumph. Reclaiming that kind of language that is ours. No, and that is uniquely ours. No, and
your short stories are also written in Taglish, or at least predominantly English with
that's a good
some
that's
secret
a
words.
this is why I love you. Thank you for that very wonderful question. No, but seriously, my first books were completely in English. That's why they had very little dialogue, because it's such a struggle to convert my my dirty thoughts into English, or my clean thoughts into English. But now more and more, no, now I'm writing screenplays and other things. No, when I write a screenplay, it's completely in Filipino. It's completely in Filipino. No, I'm writing a new book now. Actually, my publisher is in the room with me. Is in our panel, but I'm writing a new book now, and that book contains completely Filipino dialogue, even if the descriptions and the action lines are in English, which I'm more comfortable with as straight prose. So it is a more authentic portrait of the daily Filipino in terms of you don't have to translate anything anymore. No, it is what it is. And in that way, I think that every Filipino writer should seek to innovate the language, no, in whatever way they choose to. No, that is my way of seeking to innovate it. I don't know if it'll succeed. It might fail, but it's better than a dead language.
Yeah. May I ask about your short stories? Who are, or can you say, like, who is the protagonist of, or who are the protagonists of these short stories? Because, of course, one of the Filipino realities is that Filipinos live in very different, distinct realities.
Absolutely.
So
That's
could
a
you tell
really
us a bit more?
that's a terrific question, and a terrific question. I want to thank you for asking that, because my main concern now about the short story, or any literary form, or even a visual form like cinema, no, is about the gaze, no, of the writer. No, there is a middle class gaze, and as a writer in English, by default, I come from this sort of middle class. No, I was educated in a Catholic school where we had to pay a fine every time we spoke a Filipino word. No, I'm proud to say that I owe the most money, and if you count, I would be completely in debt now because I haven't paid anything. No, I didn't pay my anything. I just basically, you know, told them to stick it, where they're in Tagalog, in Filipino. No, but the point, the point is that there is a middle class gaze, and it is incumbent upon the writing class, wherever class you might. Now, it is a whether you write in Filipino or English, you are writing from a gaze that allows you, from a class that allows you the conditions to write. No, therefore you're not one of those people that has to go to work, ride 4 hours to work, 4 hours back home, nothing else, nothing to do afterwards, right? So we have a responsibility toward that gaze to make sure that that gaze respects all the classes and actually sheds light on the real struggles that matter. No, not the middle class struggles, no, but the real struggles that matter. So it becomes a sort of double challenge, right? First challenge to talk authentically, in this language that isn't really authentic to them, to those you must fight for. No, but the second challenge is to be able to see them clearly, to see things clearly. No, I'm not going to say, the bottom line is, I believe that it's very hard to acquire that right to speak for somebody else, right? And that's part of the challenge of writing in this Filipino context.
My last question, Sarge. You said your first book of short stories is has its 25th birthday next year, right? Do you think?
Yeah, I wrote it when I was 1 year old, so really excited about it. Yeah.
Just like Joe Biden is 40, I think he just said that.
But I dislike the Joe Biden, I'm Kamala Harris as a male. Just want to say.
But do you think after 25 years that they are still very timely, and or are they more locked in time after 25 years?
Sorry, are we talking about the stories themselves?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, you really know. I'm gonna go over there right now after this and have coffee with you, so we can
Please.
slug it out. Seriously, I like that's part of the experiment, because I'm republishing it and next year and having it translated into my first love language, which is Filipino. I want to see how it works in that language, if it still works as a short story. But if as a story, as a narrative without the language, let's assume that you can actually appreciate a story without its language. Let's assume in this sort of vacuum. No, I do think. I mean, I do think they worked, because I'm still writing at 25 years later. The dark side is they might not have worked, which is why I'm still writing. But
Yeah.
I like that they kind of work a little bit.
And a lot of the themes are recurring, right? I mean, the things that you mentioned, the diaspora,
Yes.
social
It's very
segregation.
weird, because my wife had to point it out to me that, why do you always write about sex? And I didn't realize it. I didn't realize it. And she took it as a compliment.
Okay. Sarge, wonderful. We have to go to the next panelist, but thank you so much so far, and come over later on. Renato Tranquilino, you're next, coming from space, right? Or where are you joining us from?
Well, I've actually just transported myself back into my room in Manila, Sampaloc. So it's kind of hot, but it's tolerable. So yeah, ready to go. I'm
Amazing.
kind of like an accidental writer. So I never really meant to be a writer. I love science fiction. And so at one point I thought, like, working in the US, well, living in Australia, then working in the US, and then coming here. I got involved in a project in the US for a sci-fi film, and I thought, hey, this is a chance I might take what I knew from here in New York and bring it over to the Philippines, and let's go make some sci-fi films there with the inexpensive labor cost and and yeah, whatever else, the extreme talents that you have here that's comparable around the world. Why not? But the problem is, when you're trying to make a sci-fi film, it's still really expensive. I mean, whatever budget you have, like special effects alone adds about an extra third to your budget. So I figured, bloody hell, it's like, this is too much. So I figured, what if I just write something write about it? And the actual move from being a scriptwriter to an author, it's bloody difficult, man. It's almost like a different world, to the point that my editor at the time, and I had to hire an editor just so that I could get my point across, like in writing sci-fi. She was going, stop being a bloody director and be a writer. And I go, what the hell does that mean? Is that okay? So he goes, well, when you're directing a film, everything is visual, right? Like you got to describe where the lights are and all that. But when you're writing a science fiction book or a fantasy book, you got to talk about the feelings, like the character. That's more important. And like having the dialogue, not just telling a story. So I had to almost relearn everything from scratch. What I thought that I could just take what I've written in screenplay and move it into a book is totally different. But anyway, regardless of that, I mean, we're here to talk about what's going to be happening in FBM, right? So I want to talk about a science fiction book that's written by Joel Pablo Salud, a very controversial character who's like a journalist. and he knows himself, mate. I hope I don't butcher your job, your book here, but he wrote something. This is quite unusual for him to write this book, okay? And it's a science fiction. I'm very proud of him for this because his publishing house wasn't really sure what to do with this one. And it's called Specimen Zero, okay? So if any of you guys have seen Splice or Species, it's very similar to that, okay? But it has all the Filipino stuff in it, like the religion, morality. I mean, the way we do sci-fi in the Philippines is we're not ashamed to say that, like, hey, there's a religious background to this, you know, because we're all like 80% Catholic and 20% Islamic. So, I mean, we don't mind, you know, so that kind of seeps into our writing. So one thing about like the Specimen Zero, which you have to have a look at FBM 2024. So for all the German folks that's here, wie geht's, guys? Go check us out and the booth and look for Specimen Zero, because it's all about playing God, you know, like with biogenetics and what happens when these things that you're playing with actually develop sentience. And now they got to figure out, which is very much like in the movie Splice, right? Now they got to figure out what's right and wrong. Where do we fit in that, like as another species with this new species that's even more powerful, more vicious, more warlike, you know? So how do we educate it that, you know, to try and live together? So we have problems already trying to live with each other, you know, like with all the wars and stuff. Now we introduce a creature that's like more powerful than us that could potentially breed, you know, at a rate unheard of, and that's quite staggering, that could potentially take us over. Again, like Splice, like Species with Natasha Henstridge. Adam Brody was in Splice. So if you guys want to figure out what I'm saying. But anyway, so for all the foreigners that will be joining us at FBM 2024, check us out in our booth and ask for Specimen Zero, a fantastic sci-fi book, equally as fantastic as a book that I have. This is mine, by the way. So this is
we can't really see it with your
yeah. I'm also launching. I'm actually launching a book as well, which is called it's my first novel, a real novel of sci-fi, which is called The Culling in Proxima. And again, that kind of talks about food as being the final commodity that's going to be highly in demand in the future. And there's going to be wars fought about that. And then basically in this book, it talks about what would happen if you rape another planet for food and the imbalance that it causes. And you don't know what the consequences of that are. And you know, you have to deal with it. So we do a lot of that now on Earth. So what happens if we take that kind of mentality and we impose it on another planet? So, you know, so that's what my book's going to be about. It's a pre-launch, and I'm doing it at Frankfurt because Frankfurt has been very nice to Pinoy sci-fi, and I wanna give Frankfurt the opportunity to be the first at seeing my novel, which is about 415 pages. That's why no one here wants to really read it, but that will change, no doubt. So.
Maybe
anyway,
you'll turn it into a movie eventually. But let me ask.
Yeah.
So the setting is interstellar, as far as I understand it.
Okay. Specimen Zero is set here. It talks about the last Great War, and so it's kind of like post-apocalyptic. So we're talking about Joel Pablo Salud, Joel Pablo Salud's book, Specimen Zero. So that's kind of like, I guess, when people start to experiment with things and see probably developing a new breed of soldiers. Again, you got to read the book. It's really cool. Pretty violent, but it's intelligent violence. So it's not just mind-numbing violence. So So there is thinking involved. So it's like a great read in that sense. Kind of like my book. Yeah.
And what about your book? So the setting is more interstellar, right? Because we are
Yeah,
grading.
it's more in Proxima Centauri, so Earth, Proxima Centauri. So it kind of draws on other my previous novellas, and so it's not heavily drawing on it, but it has references to it. So if you've seen my book at Frankfurt in 2022, they are these ones. I can't even see it. And
I hope we can post the links later on.
yeah. But anyway, so it's kind of draws on those three novellas, the stories, but as you read it, it actually it kind of flows on its own, and it's action packed. Lots of not so much cursing, lots of action, lots of killing, that sort of thing. Which is kind of like part of colonizing, when you colonize a country or a land. And it is one of three books that I'm developing, and so I'm trying to sell the rights of that in Frankfurt as well, because it's part of a universe. So I created a little universe that's like sci-fi on one side, and then urban fantasy on the other, and then on the third book they'll kind of join. And my inspiration for that is probably a guy named Raymond E. Feist with his series The Magician. If you ever read that book, fantastic book. Basically what he does is he puts together the elves, the trolls, the wizards, and all these natural enemies have to join together to fight this alien that came through a tear in the dimension. And this new alien is like samurai code, and they are bloody hard to kill. And so the elves, the trolls, and the witches, and the humans and the dwarves, they all had to learn to fight together in order to defeat this army. So that's my inspiration. So anyway, let's talk about it in Frankfurt. I'll see you all in Frankfurt, man.
Let's talk more in Frankfurt. Fantastic. Yeah. Mara, are you with us from Exploring Galaxies Publishing House?
Yes.
Where are you joining us from?
Yeah, so I'm happy to join this discussion. I'm dialing in from our office in Manila.
Nice to have you. And yeah, tell us more about your work at Exploding Galaxies. Not exploiting.
Yeah.
Talking too much about colonialism.
So I'm Mara. I'm a publisher of a new press called Exploding Galaxies. So our focus is on lost classics of Philippine literature. Some people find this unusual, but then I think it's actually quite important. So I decided to start by setting out a scenario, a very simple one actually, that happens to a lot of people. So imagine someone just recommended a book to you, and then they say, "Oh my God, it's one of our favorite. Oh, it's my favorite book of all time." And it's a novel written in 1970 about World War II Manila. And not only that, they consider it to be one of the best Filipino books written of all time. And so you go out, you look for a copy, you go to your local bookstore, and it's not there. You go to a secondhand bookshop or online, and it's also not there. You go to a library, and then it's the pandemic, for example, and so libraries are closed. So then, considering that it is actually one of the greatest novels out there, why is it missing from the shelf? And then you also come to realize, actually, there are many of these really great books also missing from from shelves. And so this is why our press exists. We are helping to change that. So we're a new publishing house. We've so far only published 2 books. So we published this in a series. So they actually look quite similar to each other. So, and then we also put the date of first publication up on the spine. So our first book was published in 1970 and our second in 1979. So this, our first book, which I'll go through later, has only been finally accessible to readers after, in the Philippines after 50 years. And then this, our second book by Linda T. Casper, it's called The Three-Cornered Sun. This was written in 1979. Linda T. Casper is now in her early 90s, and it's a work of historical fiction. And I guess what makes this press very worthwhile is so she was quite surprised by the warm reception of this book when it came out a few months ago. I think it was a novel that she'd written a long time ago, and I guess she hadn't realized that there would still be a wide readership for the book. And so having seen that there are many people who have picked up this book, it's encouraged her in her 90s to actually start writing her memoirs. So so that's what we kind of really want to achieve with Exploding Galaxies, to make sure that you know, these books come back to life. And we're really doing what we can. And so in the future, we also plan to publish short story collections, food books, and more novels.
Sounds amazing, Mara. So as I understood, your process is pretty much that people tell you, hey, one of my most favorite books is this and that. Can you go find it and republish it?
Oh, no, but actually I do get that a lot. And it's been interesting because it's like a lot of these books I find are actually in urgent need of republication, only because these books you know, should really always be easily accessible to many readers. So I don't have a particular order actually for these books. And there are a lot in our pipeline that I'm really excited about. So I do really welcome when people say, oh, you know, I'm really interested in this book. So then I go out looking for the book. But already as it is, there are actually quite a lot of books that we have in the pipeline. Actually, I was hoping today to maybe focus on our first book. This is But for the Lovers by Wilfrido D. Noliedo. It was published, it was first published in 1970. So I think what I will do, I mean, I hope that I can convey in such a short amount of time the importance of this novel and how important it is that it is widely read today. But I'll start with what this book is about. So this novel is set around a boarding house in World War II Manila during the Japanese occupation. And the city of Manila at this time was nearly obliterated by the war between, you know, Japan and America on making Manila a stage for battle. And so if Manila was a stage, it was as though Noliedo cast his characters as if in a play. Noliedo had written award-winning plays as well, so I kind of felt this theatrical quality actually throughout the reading of this book. So he centered this brutal universe on this on a floating, wandering yet unformed character named Alma, of whom I guess the possibilities of the Philippine nation can be projected onto by her admirers. Like among them are an aging Spanish vaudevillian clown, a petty thief, a blue-eyed American soldier, a maniacal Japanese major, and among other stand-ins for colonialism and its failures. But also above the plot of this novel, I think we have to also address how much this novel is actually a triumph of language. And what makes this a masterpiece to me, and I guess to many people, is the very high, relentless pitch that Noliedo mastered and manipulated the English language with. And he knew how to turn the English language, but also the Filipino and Spanish language, to turn it loose upon itself. And I think this book is both mad and masterful, full of wordplay and unique and cutting precision that I can't ascribe this kind of writing to anybody else. I cannot compare it with anything else actually. To me it's genius. And so I'm really honored to actually have the opportunity to publish this book. So this book, as mentioned, was first published in America by E.P. Dutton in 1970. And again, it was published in the early 90s in America. But this book has not been on shelves here in the Philippines for the last 50 years until this edition last year. So in a way, we're filling in an over 50-year long absence, and we're making up for lost time. So maybe a little bit about the book itself. So of the book design rather. So we wanted to make it loud. We wanted to come in with a bang. So we published the book with Noliado's name in big bold neon orange against a dusty bloody red that matches the contents of this inside the book. And we wanted the book to feel special as well. So from the moment people touch it, it is already well, at least we hope that it's already an enjoyable reading experience. It's a collectible, it's a celebration. And as for Noliado, unfortunately, he actually died in 2004. So when But for the Lovers was first published, he was in his late 30s and he had just completed his fellowship in Iowa. He had left his job as a journalist in Manila, and where he was also writing a lot of award-winning plays and short stories. And they say that a lot of writers in the 1960s wanted to be like him. And so he actually returned to the Philippines in the 1970s and then left again in the 80s, where he stayed until his death in California in 2004. So this book is truly a homecoming. I'm thankful to the Noliado family actually for the trust that they put in to a first-time publisher like me.
Excellent, Mara. This sounds very interesting. And maybe for me also a bit of trivia, but before I came to the Philippines, of course, being socialized in Germany and having, of course, also learned about World War II and so on from a very German perspective, oftentimes in Germany, there's not enough, there's a certain ignorance about the war, the Second World War in Asia, and that Manila was actually the second most destroyed city after Warsaw. Which is a crazy scale, I would say. And I think in that regard, certainly a book playing in this setting could be very interesting for a German audience. Your readership in the Philippines, or is it also a global readership that you have so far?
So this is what I've been focused mainly on getting this out in the Philippines. I think that's the most important. And then moving forward, I really do believe that a book like this actually needs to be shared outward. So from the Philippines out. So I'm really hoping actually to really capture a lot of readers, even Filipinos around the world. I think people really need to read this book. It deserves a place among the greatest works, I believe, in the world. And yeah, so I truly believe that it's really for all lovers of great literature.
Fantastic, Mara. Thank you so much. And you'll be in Frankfurt as well?
Yes,
Excellent.
we'll be there.
Perfect. Okay, going on with Carla. Are you with us, Carla? Hey there. You're still on mute.
Yes.
Where are you joining us from, Carla?
I'm actually in Melbourne, Australia right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, on vacation, and it happened to fall today. So let's do it.
I think the panel mirrors the classic Filipino being everywhere, spread over the
Everywhere,
world. Tell us a bit. Tell us a bit more about yourself. You're an author, right?
Yes, so I am an author. I specifically write contemporary romance with Filipino characters. All of my books are currently written in English, and I wish I had a copy of my books right now, but as I'm on vacation, I only have a photo. So this is the book I wanted to talk about. This is The Queen's Game, which is a royal romance, a Southeast Asian royal romance, wrote in 2016. And around that time, Alyssa Cole's Reluctant Royal series was very popular, and it was well written. It kind of blew my mind how well she wrote a Black historical romance. A Black royal romance set in contemporary times. And as with a lot of my writing, certainly, especially with this book, I started to wonder what something like that would sound like with Filipino characters. And seeing as the Philippines has a very unique history in terms of leadership and royalty, I didn't want to touch that. And I wanted to focus on what I knew, which was romance. So I did some research on different royalty systems around Southeast Asia, and I came up with this story. So it's the story of a young royal from a land called Sincamare, and she falls in love with a prince of a neighboring principality. And there are letters exchanged. There is some political drama, but at the end, this is a romance story. So there is sex, there is sunflowers, there are lots of kisses, and it ends with a happily ever after, as they always do. I think it's really interesting being a romance author writing Filipino characters in English, mostly because people seem to be surprised that it's being done. This year, I published a book called Manila Takes Manhattan with Harlequin, and I got a lot of messages from Filipinos in different places in the world expressing surprise that something like this is being written. But it has been written. I'm not the first, I'm not the last, and I'm really happy about that. I am in a group of writers that I find myself in the same league as, people who write on Wattpad from their phones. Like, I don't know if anyone's mentioned this before, but the Philippines is the biggest readership of Wattpad in the world. So that's a lot of Filipinos reading a lot of words, also by Filipinos, just writing from their phones, writing from the bus on their way to work, like whenever they have the time and whenever they feel like it. And it's usually romance. And to me, it's such an honor to be able to write in that genre, mostly because I am among people who want love, who want justice in their life. And I believe that's what romance really gives us. As readers, the more we read, the more we have an idea of what a good life would look like, what a just life would look like, as we will always have a happily ever after. So as a genre, that's what I love most about romance, is that I'm equal to these people. And as for the Queen's Game, it's kind of different in that it is a Southeast Asian royal romance. And I would be very happy to talk to anyone about the book if they had questions about how the world was built, how the world works, and how the romance was prioritized. And yeah, that's me mostly.
Sounds very interesting. Maybe because you were mentioning some of your peers or some people telling you they were surprised that a book like that is written by a Filipina author, that were they thinking there's a lot of taboos that you are sort of reaching, or what were the
I don't know if it's taboos, but I think the surprise really mostly came from the fact that the characters were still very much Filipino. In all of my books, there are Filipino words that I do not translate. I don't have an index for readers. It is just there. It is one of the, I wouldn't call it a struggle, but it is one of the things that has happened in my writing career where I'm asked why why would your Filipino characters speak in Filipino but then think in English? But that's just the way I am. Sarge mentioned earlier a middle class gaze, and I am very much in that middle class, and that's just the way I speak. That's just the way I think, and that's the way I write as well. So I have a lot of readers both here and abroad who have been very happily Googling things, and that makes me so happy and so excited. Like when I make a reference to, let's say, a song from a local band, or when I talk about a particular kind of Filipino food and they look it up and they tell me, oh, I wish I could taste it. It just sounds so good. And I think that is kind of the power that, I mean, it's so, it's so boastful to say it, but it feels like a superpower to be able to share parts of what you feel is your culture to other people and not have to explain yourself too much. Yeah, so I really enjoy that part.
And maybe let me ask, because you said it plays in a royal setting. Is that because a royal setting is somewhat, I don't know, shinier from outside, or is it a social critique of the Philippine social system,
Let's
or
see.
what?
I thought it would be interesting to explore like a version of the Philippines that does have royalty. Like I said, we've had a lot of our history has been interesting in terms of leadership and what we expect from leaders, what we want from them. And as a romance writer, I thought it would be fun to explore what if we had a princess? What if we had a regent? What if there was a principality next to yours and you wanted to work together, but not necessarily get married yet? So all of these questions sort of came together in this book. And what we got is Princess Nina and Prince Felipe and falling in love with each other and trying to figure out what that means for them.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, I mean, dynasties, they're already there, right?
Yes.
Maybe not royal dynasties.
Yes.
All right.
So I wrote this at the time when royal romance was kind of popular. We have the romance market has since moved on to witches and magic, and I did write that a few years later. So it's been fun, kind of seeing what everyone's reading and just trying to think, okay, what would, if they were Filipino, what would that be like? If it was set in the Philippines, what would that be like? Because the story will change mostly because of who they are and what they believe in and stuff like that. So yeah.
And is there, maybe that's a stupid question, but is there a certain Filipina perspective on romance, or your perspective on romance, that might be particular in a way, maneuvering a lot of taboos, for instance, or?
Yeah. So I think in particular, based on feedback from a global audience the global audience that has read my books, they are surprised at the amount of family that's usually in books. The role that families play in a woman's decisions is always something that surprises them. There's the factor that these characters cannot get divorced. So it is not common in my circles, in my romance circles, it's not common for two characters to end up married, because there is that possibility that they're not going to be able to back out of it if they need to. So we don't usually feature that. There is also surprise in just the fact that a lot of, my characters in particular are women in their 20s and 30s figuring out their lives from a certain social class. Again, Sarge has mentioned that. And I cannot presume to write something I don't know. And so this is the level that I know. And so that's where I write from. I recognize a lot that there are still huge gaps in terms of Filipino romance. I have yet to read a Chinese Filipino romance, a Filipino Muslim romance. So those would be so interesting to read, and I would love to see them if they're out there. But yeah, I'm just writing from the corner that I know I am from. So yeah.
And maybe to add for the European or German audience, the Philippines, as a thoroughly Catholicized country, doesn't know divorce so far. There's some special forms of annulment, but besides the Vatican,
Very
it's probably
complicated.
the only country without divorce. Exactly. Thank you so much, Carla.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna add. Sorry,
Sure.
one last thing in terms of sex, because there is sexual content in my work. The group that I write with, called Romance Class, we have guidelines when it comes to sex. So it must be consensual, it must be sexy, it must be protected if it's not part of the plot. So there are guidelines that we do work around to help the writers be more comfortable writing those kinds of scenes. But yeah, for us in particular, and for me in particular, it was kind of difficult to tell myself that it was okay to write sex scenes, especially when they are so important to forwarding the romance of a plot. So anyways, that's about that.
Super interesting, Carla. Thank you so much. Let's continue to Ned Benedict. Are you with us from University of Santo Tomas Publishing?
Hi, Julian. Good afternoon.
Hey there. Where are you joining us from?
I'm here in my office in Manila.
In the city of Manila.
Yes.
And the University
So
of Santo Tomas, one of the oldest or the oldest city in the Philippines?
it is the oldest university in the Philippines. Yes.
Amazing. Tell us more about what you do. What is your connection to publishing, editing, writing in the Philippines?
Oh, well, I started as a writer first. I'm an author first before I ended up being the director of the University Press just last year. I primarily write poetry. I have two books out. And another one on the way. I just got the full layout this morning, so I was very ecstatic. All from the University
Congratulations.
of the Thank you. All from the University of the Philippines Press, where I'm currently taking my PhD. And I'm also a translator. I translate from Filipino to English. The first book came out last year, The Vanished. If you check out the Frankfurt Philippine catalog for fiction, this is the first book that you will see. So I'm also happy about that. So yeah, so I teach, I write poetry, I teach literature and creative writing, and I'm also a translator. And for some reason, I was appointed deputy director of the University Publishing House in 2019. And then last year, when my boss's when her term ended, I became the director. So I'm fairly new to the job, but it's the oldest university press in Asia and one of the oldest in the world.
Exciting. And the portfolio of UST Publishing House is a lot of scientific books as well as novels, or tell us a bit more about that.
Oh, well, our bread and butter is actually the religious titles, theology, spirituality, philosophy. But we do publish a lot of literary titles as well as scholarly titles. Actually, most of our titles are under literary. But yeah, I suppose going back centuries, if we're counting all of those, it's mostly the religious and theology titles. Actually, the first book in the Philippines was Doctrina Christiana, and it was published by La Imprenta de los Dominicanos de Manila, which eventually became the UST Publishing House. It came out in, let me see, 1593. And that was back when the Holy Roman Empire was conducting witch trials in Germany. So I just Googled what was happening in Germany in 1593. So just to give historical reference there. And yeah, so they established the press first, and when they established the university, a little less than 2 decades later, in 1611, the Dominican press became part of the university. So it became the University of Santo Tomas Press, Santo Tomas University Press, and now it's called the UST Publishing House. So just a little
Very
bit of history
interesting.
there.
Mm.
Yeah.
And is there a particular book that you would like to present to us today?
Oh, yes. There's one particular book that I'm excited to show everyone, since we're also part of the Philippine delegation to Frankfurt, and that is Duterte Watch: Descent into Authoritarianism, collected commentaries by veteran journalist Virgil O. Santos. Yeah, so this came out in 2022, won the National Book Award for Journalism, and now on its second printing, which is rare for us, for a small university press. So we're very happy about that, and we're very happy with the both the critical reception and the mass appeal of the title. So it's primarily about Duterte's legacy as president, whether we should call it legacy or otherwise. So it covers the unreasonable arrests, the alleged crimes, the Davao Death Squad, and the international exposure that we've received because of, or the reputation we've garnered from the international media because of the war on drugs, and the suppression of press freedom. This is a good resource for readers looking for insight as to why Duterte is now currently being investigated by the International Criminal Court for alleged crimes, for alleged human rights violations. So, yeah, so these are also, it also contains articles previously published from Rappler, which is the online news site founded by Nobel Prize winner Maria Ressa, the Philippine Daily Inquirer, which is the largest broadsheet in the Philippines, or the most widely distributed broadsheet in the Philippines, and the New York Times. So it's basically a one-stop shop for all of Vergel Santos's articles about Duterte. And just a little
Very-
background on
Please.
the author. He's a veteran journalist, is widely respected. He primarily wrote for the Manila Chronicle and the Manila Times for the major part of his career. And now he contributes, he's a contributor for Rappler.
Very interesting. And you said that you're already in the second edition of the book, so you have received a very strong response from the readership.
Yes, we did. And it was something that we didn't really expect, if I may divulge that, because we got the manuscript. It was still during Duterte's time. It came out in time right before the presidential elections. So I guess it was the timing, and also because it became a finalist and eventually a winner of the National Book Award. So awards have a purpose here in the Philippines. It really drives marketing, and this is, I guess, another proof of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's an important contribution for now after Duterte to reviewing his, however you call it, legacy or reign,
Reputation,
to maybe also learn from some things and improve democracy as a whole.
Yes, and just because I mentioned the witch trials, it's just a coincidence that one of my favorite insights in the book is how he was going after the women in prominent positions. So there was what happened with the former Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno, who was appointed by his predecessor. She was removed from her position. Senator Leila de Lima, who was instrumental in investigating the crimes when he was the alleged crimes. Let me just qualify that: the alleged crimes when he was a mayor in Davao. She was jailed for the entirety or for the rest of her term as a senator. He went after Rappler. The administration went after Rappler and Maria Ressa with some called dubious charges, and of course, most prominently, his former Vice President Leni Robredo, because in the Philippines, we elect the president and vice president separately. So whenever she gets prominence for doing the right thing, because she's a very well-respected leader, the trolls would come out of their caves and just bombard the social media with lies and intrigue. So it was interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I'm sure I have to make sure to read it as well. So we can also meet you in Frankfurt in October.
Yes, I will be there.
Thank you so much, Ned. Continuing with Cecilia Brainard, are you with us?
I'm
Fantastic. Hey there. From where are you joining us?
Okay, so here it is. I'm in California and it is 2:10 a.m. So if I start to get spacey, that's because it's really early in the morning here.
Oh,
But
wow. Yeah, thank you so much for taking this sacrifice, and I'm also sorry for having you last, but of course not least in the panelist list. But yeah, now even more the opportunity for you to speak about your work as an author Do you want to tell us a bit more, or also already
Yes.
present a book that you would like to talk about?
Yes. So I actually wanted to give a little bit of background about myself, because it explains a lot of where my stories, because I'm a fiction writer primarily, come from. So I was born in Cebu, Philippines, and it's a small sock-shaped island in the middle of the archipelago, to those who are not familiar with Cebu. And so this was a while ago, Julian, 19, yeah, whatever. But it was a very interesting place for a child. And my mother came from a political family. There were a lot of stories in that family, a lot of stories in the small town of Cebu where I grew up in. Some of the stories that I heard from my mother about her relatives included a great grandmother who probably had a liaison with a Spanish admiral, another great grandmother who used to hoard paper money in her pillow and it was accidentally burned. And my favorite relative, though, was this great grandmother who I guess they got married at 13 in the olden days. This was back in the 18 something, 1850. In any case, she got married very early, had 16 children, most of them died. She was widowed at the age of 39. She inherited the newspaper business of her husband, a printing press, and she carried on with it. One of her sons became a Philippine senator, my grandfather. Another son became a Catholic archbishop, and another son became a Philippine congressman. And I used to hear stories about this formidable woman. She was referred to as the matriarch who ruled. And she just sort of stayed with me forever, even though I did not meet her. And I will talk to her a little bit more later on about the book that I later on wrote, inspired by her. The other thing about this little place where I grew up in was that people were interesting. I mean, there was a woman whom it was just a story, but she was called a witch. And we were just terrified of her. Apparently at night, she would turn into this big sigbin, we called it sigbin, but it's like a dog kind of creature that would attack people. And there was another woman who supposedly had horns, and I wrote the story about women with horns. So there's a lot going on in there. And there were my folks who used to also talk a lot, and their friends who used to talk a lot about World War II. My father had, and his family, I was not yet born, had to go to Mindanao and all the horrible things that happened. And I guess I must have been an eavesdropper because I actually kind of remembered many of those stories and used a lot of them in my first novel, When the Rainbow Goddess Wept. So I mention all of these because in some form or other, the stories affected, my three novels are all set in not Cebu, I call it Ubek. It's Cebu backwards. It's a lot like Cebu. Many of my stories, I have 4 short story collections, also are set in Ubek, even though I also have stories set in Manila, in the United States, in Spain, in other places. But this particular place had some kind of magic, I guess, to me. And so I did want to share that. So even now, even though we live in California, I maintain a residence in Cebu and I visit it regularly. It is still very dear to me.
Amazing.
So go ahead.
Please.
Well,
I was so interested by the story of your grandmother, so I'm excited to hear how that maybe finds its way to your literature.
Yes. So I did want to talk about my third novel, and it's the newspaper Widow. And So actually this photo is of my mother, but the newspaper widow novel was inspired by this great grandmother who was widowed at the age of 39 and had to carry on, her husband's newspaper business. So in my novel, of course, my Lola Remedios has been changed, and she is no longer that person. She has now become Ines Maceda in my book. And instead of having 16 children, Ines Maceda has one son. And it happens, and this is set in 1909 in this mythical place I have created, Ubec, which is really like Cebu in the Philippines. And this is an interesting time in the Philippines because in 1909, the Spaniards had just lost to the Americans and were kind of driven out of the country in some sense. And the Americans were starting imperialism, and they were now in the Philippines. And this period is what we call the American period in the Philippines. So this is the setting of my novel. What happens, how the story kicks off, is that there is a murdered, the body of a murdered priest is discovered in a creek. And as it turns out, the son, the only son of our widow, Inez, is picked up as a suspect and is jailed. And Inez at this time was just newly married, grieving, and she's trying to make heads and tails out of this newspaper business that she ended up with, and now she has to do something to save her son. She has a friend, a French seamstress, and together they decide that they must find the murderer, the real murderer, in order to free the son. And so the story kicks off. The story is, I would like to think that there are elements in it that are similar to Alexander McCall Smith's #1 Ladies Detective Agency. And that maybe my Ines Maceda may have qualities that Precious Ramotse has. There is, the novel is character driven. It's a gentle novel. There's no blood and gore and sex in there. And maybe you call it cozy mystery. I am not sure exactly what category it is. But it's mostly about character revelation and about friendship and relationships, even while these two women carry on with solving the crime. Book reviewers have called it, have said that the characters are compelling, that it reveals a lot about Philippine history, culture, and the society of the time. And another reviewer has said that the plot is layered and unique. It was a finalist, the book was a finalist for the 37th National Book Award. It was shortlisted for the Cirilo Bautista Prize. And actually this book and some other books of mine have been subjects for academic studies, academic papers, which kind of is gratifying to me. Ned Parfan forgot to mention that my publisher is the University of Santo Tomas Publishing House, and that Ned and I work closely with this, and he's a great, very patient guy, because I can be just impossible. Thank you, Ned. And I am also very excited to mention, in relation to this novel, that I just heard from my newly acquired literary agent, Senja Pozar, that we have an offer from Serbia, and hoping for a couple more other possibilities. And so I'm really very excited. And here's Ned holding up some of my other books. They have just reissued Magdalena, which is another novel of mine, and they reissued The Newspaper Widow. So thank you, Ned.
Fantastic, Cecilia. This sounds amazing. And then your books will certainly also be in Frankfurt. Will you also be in Frankfurt in person?
I will be in Frankfurt, so I'm looking
Amazing.
forward to it. And
Because we are already approaching, we still have some time for some Q&A, which I will still allow, because I would love to delve more into the role of this matriarch in because the Philippines is a somewhat, well, I'm not asking a question now, but if there's no other questions, then I'll pose my question. Maybe now giving the chance to the audience, either writing your questions in the chat, or just telling, I think you can raise your hand. Yes, Sarge?
There was one question that addressed to me in the chat, and maybe I'll start with that so I can just
Please.
Get me out of the way. No, the question was, I'm interested to hear your thoughts insofar as the stories we tell about ourselves as Filipinos. Do we not run the risk of portraying and then accepting our identity as one of the victims of our struggles? That's the only stories we can tell ourselves, about our victimhood. I very much love your point on the middle class gaze and the privilege it takes to write from that. But I'd like to hear your take on our stories of love and joy and success, and where you situate that in the grander landscape of Filipino stories. So I'm going to extend this webinar by about 3 hours just to answer this point by point. But I'll start with the 300-slide presentation, which I prepared while Ned was talking. Sorry, Ned, he's my publisher. No, but really to answer that, it's really, talking about our defeats, talking about our victimhood, is part of the it's part for the course, part for the very long uphill course for Southeast Asia, for East Asia's oldest democracy. In fact, this is one of the main focuses of my small publishing house. We focus on issues on books about democracy and about the long struggle toward democracy, and all those other issues. Ned himself, representing UST Press, also mentions that. I think that we must continue to write about our defeats, the extrajudicial killings, the forgotten victims of dictatorship, the forgotten dictatorship itself, and the struggle for truth and individual emancipation, because, it's part of literature's responsibility to write about them. It's part of our literature's responsibility to write about this until we die, until nobody else dies also. In fact, my current work, that I'm writing now is a novel about a member of the New People's Army, the militant arm of the outlawed left, who also happens to be a male prostitute, But it's a love story, It's a love story. It's a romance. It's also funny, set in the days of decadence, the disco era, which also coincided with the first Marcos era, absolute dictatorship, Yes, we must acknowledge all the struggles that we lost. And we have to turn them into a narrative reality that we can understand. And then again, may I just remind ourselves and myself that we proceed from Rizal. Our national hero is a novelist, is a writer. And if when I talk about the primacy for in my sake of the short story, I see Rizal's novels as gatherings of short stories. In fact, we remember the short stories in Rizal's novels, in that way. So if we do proceed from Rizal, who wrote novels of protest, then we must continue the protest until we win. In fact, Rizal himself, this is a side note, was quite privileged, and he had a middle class gaze. He had a grant to go to Germany to publish his book. That grant came from his wealthy parents. The struggle continues. One day, our post-colonial identity as a true democracy, and a magical, ineffable literature in the world's imagination, will prevail, will rise and prevail. Frankfurt is a very, very good step, very large step toward that. But as a writer, I'm going to say that I'm willing to wait 200 years for that to happen. Just keep writing it until it happens. That's our responsibility.
Amazing, Sarge. Thank you so much. There's also a lot of other comments and questions in the chat, and also a lot of compliments. So I'm very happy to hear that. I think there was one question for you, Ned, about how to get published by UST. I guess just to contact you, and maybe you're also willing to share your contact details. I'm sure we can also find you on Google to UST Publishing House. Was there any other questions that one of the panelists wanted to answer? Just looking in the virtual room. because there was also a lot of going back and forth. So I think I have to do some archiving now and going through the chat. Maybe some announcements. There will be another webinar, a masterclass that is happening. I'm not having the dates yet, but for sure you will find it if you go on litform.de again, or certainly also by the the National Book Development Board. There will also be an Asian, a special Asia stage space at Frankfurt Book Fair, and there's a lot of more information on the reading trends and so on from Southeast Asia. So for anybody who is joining Frankfurt Book Fair, there's a lot of more resources. And I'm very glad that all of you panelists will be there in Frankfurt as well. So any of the questions maybe some of the audience has now, you can delve into that deeper in the direct conversations with our esteemed panelists. Fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. If some of the things were too fast, again, this webinar has been recorded, so you can still go back if you maybe forgot one of the titles, if you didn't catch all of them. And yeah, looking forward to exchanging more and seeing all of you in Frankfurt. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.